Hello and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Cohen. So at the time this episode was released, we are only 35 days from Election Day in 2024. And if you're watching this in late October, we may be down to less than a week. Pundits and many in the media have said this may be the most consequential election in our lifetime. I don't know about that, but what I can say is that it's certainly been one of the most contentious and unusual. So far, we've seen assassination attempts, criminal indictments, and defamation lawsuits over the course of this election cycle. Additionally, after pressuring Joe Biden to drop out of the race, a nominee was selected without any primary votes. Further, the tone of the rhetoric in this election cycle has been among the most vitriolic in the history of American politics. And not just on the part of candidates. Social, corporate, and alternative media have also participated in the vitriol. This against a backdrop of economic, social, and cultural challenges that amplified the tenor of this election to that of a heated argument. In the midst of that argument, it's sometimes hard to separate the issues from the noise. So I've invited an old friend and colleague of mine, David Kerr, onto the program to see if he and I can help you cut through some of that noise and clarify even just a little bit of what is going on in this election cycle. David is a former elected Stafford County School Board member, a writer, and an educator. Well, welcome, David. We're glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here, Tom.
So we normally start off with asking people if there's any information about yourself you'd like to share with us.
Well, I've lived in Stafford County since 1989, a long time. I served on the county school board. Was elected to 2 terms to the county school board. Probably the best job I ever had. And I write for Inside Nova, which is it's a Prince William publication, but it gets republished in Fredericksburg Advance from time to time. And I really enjoy doing that because I get to write about Virginia politics, get to write about regional politics, like the congressional race. And, as you know, I like to write about stuff, World War II stuff, little observations and things like that. And I have a lot of fun doing that. I have a little farmette with 2 horses where I live with my wife, Daphne. And I also teach at Virginia Commonwealth University as an adjunct and teach political science.
Yep, you've been there quite a while.
8 years.
Wow. Flies by.
I think you had something to do with my getting a job there.
Yes, sir. Yes. And then whenever they didn't want us, they got former state elected officials to fill in for us. That's a nice honor.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of the standby, the backup team.
No, they're a backup to us. So.
Yeah, you're right.
That's right.
I like to think of it that way.
Oh, cool. So, we're this episode is about the 2024 election. Of course, a lot of attention will be on the presidency. So we might as well talk. Where are we now? What do you think we are right now? As we do this on September 19th with the election.
Right now, it is. I am surprised. It is so close. I honestly expected it to be more of a gap, one way or the other. Now we're going to. I know we're going to talk a little about how we got here, but the fact is, I think that we've got a race so close and with so many strange dynamics in it that when this goes on air, it might all have changed. It's possible, but right now, for instance, there's a New York Times poll that shows Harris and Trump tied nationally, something that almost never happens because usually Trump is lagging nationally, and actually shows Harris in not a good position, but a more favorable position in the 7 swing states that are really necessary if you want to be president. So it's way too close to call. I think this could be one of these things that goes into several days after the election.
And it could be. It's sort of the interesting thing is that in 16 and then especially in 20, a lot of the mainstream Republicans, which we would now call the Haley voters, were either staying home or going for Biden. And so this election, if you listen to those voters, they've come back and they're going to vote for Republicans because of issues, which is really an interesting, and I think that's why it's a little tighter this time than it was in 20, because that chunk of voters, excluding the George Wills and the Jonah Goldbergs and those, and Bill Kristol that are Trump haters. But a lot of the mainstream Republicans,
And Dick Cheney.
yeah, and Dick Cheney and Liz. But a lot of the mainstreamers, the people that were Haley voters that came out, or the people who were for W. Bush or Bush 41, are just like, we're looking at issues. And so I think that's why it's making it a little bit closer this time, as opposed to where we were 4 years ago.
One thing that really surprised me, other people made this observation, so it's nothing original, is that it's just how much the debate didn't really seem to matter to the polls. Now, everybody, well, a vast majority of people who saw the debate said, going away, Kamala Harris won. And it's pretty hard to argue with that. It was a pretty disastrous event for Donald Trump. She baited him, and he took the bait, like when I go fishing. And the thing is, though, it doesn't seem to have affected the polls in a massive amount. It might have arrested her decline, because she was actually slipping a bit. So that would be significant. The other side of the story is it should have given her a boost of 1, 2, 3%, and it didn't. So I find that a dynamic that I can't quite explain, except I really don't think there's much more people can be told about Donald Trump that they don't already know.
Right. And it's interesting. I think that if she was getting a bump from it, I think the second assassination attempt would have blunted that. So it's sort of, as you said at the beginning, it's like tomorrow things may change completely because of different events. Who knows what's going to happen? And so the debate happened. It was like cataclysmic on one side, and then within a couple of days you have something cataclysmic that sort of buffers it. So why don't we go back to how we got here? So you can pick whichever side you want to start with and how we got here.
Well, I was, I'm a Democrat. You don't hold that against me, or you wouldn't have me on your show. But the situation was looking so grim, even before Joe Biden had the debate. There was angst about his being the party candidate. He was just too old. And even if he wasn't too old, he was kind of enfeebled when it came to public presentations. And the debate was a complete and total disaster. It made Donald Trump look like a star debater that second go round. It was I've never seen anything like it. I'm not sure we'll ever see anything like it again anytime soon. And that was a complete revolution from the base up against Joe Biden. And his best friends were turning on him. Delegates our own local delegates were turning on him. Those people who'd been elected to be delegates to the Democratic National Convention. It was the mechanism that caused the shift that made Kamala Harris the nominee and sunk Joe Biden was a legitimate mechanism. The convention has that power. It just happened so incredibly fast. Give you an example of how my reaction to it was. I was really, forgive me, I hope I can use this word. I was really pissed off that they dumped Joe Biden. I mean, he's our guy. He's gotten the nomination. He ran into the primaries. Well, the heck with this. I had all my old Joe Biden stickers and all this, and I'm really agitated about it. And then I have to admit, she masterfully engineered the transition from Joe Biden candidate to her as being candidate in what was it, about less than a week.
Right.
Nothing happens that fast in American politics unless there's some sort of truly cataclysmic event, like somebody dies. And nobody died here. It's just it was a massive movement that took place in about 3 weeks,
right,
or more, 2.
I mean, yes. Well, and to me, what was sort of interesting was that some of the people from his campaign, there's a woman named Daley that came out and said their internal polls were not showing him tanking, but it was the constant barrage of his friends being on the nightly shows and being in the media, just bashing him and bashing him and bashing him and saying he can't win. That was driving his numbers down. And then it was, oh my gosh, he can't win because his polls are bad. Well, you've just spent 2 weeks saying he can't win. And then they even had, it was sort of interesting. There were reports on CNN and in the Washington Post, I believe, where his donors were saying, we won't give you any money. And there were even talks on CNN that his people who were going to give money to his library were saying they wouldn't give money to his presidential library if he didn't drop
Well,
out.
that's a bit much.
And so then he drops out, and then all these people come out and say he's wonderful and great, and he was the most consequential president since the Cold War, which I think you and I will think of other ones, that one-term presidents that were consequential. And then Pelosi saying he should be on Mount Rushmore, and and it's funny that you said that the people. If you talk to regular Democrats, they were all saying he needs to go. We need to get rid of him. This is all a move to get rid of him. They were very candid about it. But the people up at the top were, oh, no, we never did anything like that. It was just sort of, the polls did it. And it was really, I agree with you. It's just sort of sad that somebody who worked really hard would just, not one member of his cabinet came out to defend him. But as soon as he backed out, and it was Kamala, you saw different members of the cabinet coming out and saying wonderful things about her.
Our own Mark Warner, who I like Mark Warner, but the fact that he took the gauntlet up against Joe Biden, wanted to have a frank discussion about his ability to carry on the ticket, left me a little cold. It's like, is that really the way you treat the president of the United States or the leader of your party, by starting a whispering campaign in the Senate?
Yeah, but as you pointed out, they did a good job of getting her the nomination. They've done an excellent job of and I don't mean this negatively because of all campaigns are packages, but packaging it, doing it well. They primed her very well for the debate, as you said. They had made it very clear they were going to bait Trump, and he walked right into it. It was sort of disappointing. Yes, I saw the clips and the news reports about Trump being on Gutfield last night, and they asked him what was his biggest regret in the debate, and he said not attacking the moderators. I'm thinking, I would think that the bigger debate would be that you walked right into every trap that she set for you. So that's sort of but she did a very good job of setting that up, and she's been very good at being nebulous, and that goes back to trying to attract the Haley voters. The attitude is if we don't give her opinions, the Haley voters will come to us, which, oddly enough, it's the Haley voters that want issues. So it's really an interesting dichotomy on that.
She hasn't been long on issues at this point, nor has she been particularly candid in expressing them to the press. And I'm not too sure what are we looking at this point? Probably by the time this goes on the air, we'll be down to a month before the election. Most candidates who run for president have years to introduce themselves to the public as the candidate for president. Let's go back to 2 years ago. There were a whole array of Nikki Haley. She was running for president. She had plenty of time to state her opinions and to state her positions on the issues. Harris has had about 80 days.
Yeah.
So I'm not too sure what kind of specifics you're going to get at this point in a really rollicking campaign, where we've kind of passed the issue paper preparation side, where you're strictly into mobilizing voters, ginning up the Democratic faithful. I think that's where she is right now, and I really don't think you're going to see that much more specificity. That's always been a word for me.
Specificity.
Thank you, sir. Specificity in her campaign. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, and voting starts in Virginia tomorrow. So by the time this airs, there's going to be loads of vote. It's already counted. That already been in when you go in person, you vote and then you put it in. It's counted. You can't change it.
Can I ask the moderator a question?
You certainly may.
Who do you think that the early voting benefits the most?
At this point, it used to be the Democrats. I think the Republicans have actually made certain states, but the Republicans seem to have been making outreach on that. So we'll see. But different states, I know Michigan, the candidate for Senate, has put a lot of attention on early voting. And Youngkin has done it in Virginia. So it'll be interesting which way it will go. At least you're not getting the Republicans saying never, never, never.
That was sort of shooting themselves in the foot, frankly, because the Democrats were anxiously going out and voting early. Remember the last election, we had the pandemic going on, and we all, in Stafford County, we all went to the, I forget where
courthouse.
Courthouse?
Yeah.
Wasn't it the airport?
Oh, the airport. That's 4 years ago. Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. And the reason why I was telling my students, the reason why, and I know you do this when you were in your classes at VCU, the reason why we end up needing is because if somebody lives in Stafford, I ask the students when do their parents leave for work, and they say 4:30, 5 o'clock. Well, polls open at 6. I say, do they get home by 7 or after? And like some nights after. And so if you don't early vote, you run the risk in a community like Stafford or Spotsy or Fredericksburg or even Prince William, that it's great you cross the line, but you can't get to your polling place by 7, so you can't vote. So there's a logic to doing it, but it is really an interesting dynamic if it's going to make a difference.
We've had some supervisor races where there was a big incident way back when in Rock Hill. There was a big incident on 95,
Mm-hmm.
and the incumbent won by about 50 votes, and probably his opponent's voters were all caught in traffic because he was appealing to a younger commuting audience.
Yeah.
But anyway, your point's well taken.
Right. And if we shift over to Trump, how did we get here with Trump? You sort of mentioned that, people know a lot about him already.
And that's the interesting dynamic. There's not much he can do to reintroduce. Kamala Harris has the challenge of introducing herself to the public. She's still saying, "I'm Kamala Harris. This is what I stand for, or what I'm going to tell you I'm going to stand for." And everybody knows Trump. And I think when he takes the bait, when he says the crazy things about eating cats and dogs, my cats are all indoor cats. I think I don't think people are that surprised. And I don't think they get all that agitated because they already know him.
Right. And it's sort of interesting that it's almost a weird version of Lucy and the football. It's sort of like, this is going to be the thing that will knock him down, and then it doesn't. And then there's like, okay, here's another football, and this isn't going to do it. There's this trial, there's this action, there's that action, there's this broadcast, there's this, and it doesn't seem to work, which is sort of an interesting dynamic that no matter what happens, it doesn't seem to stop it and stop him from it. And I think that it's sort of an interesting dynamic that a good chunk of people do not like him and never will like him and are not going to vote for him. And that's big bait in the woods. And then you have a big chunk of people, it's almost the same number, who either like his issues or look at the economy and other issues and like they can't go the other way. So that's why I think we're sort of in this stagnation of it, that is sort of stuck so close, because I think if what Nikki Haley was saying, whoever nominated the first one. So when you had Joe Biden looking so badly, Trump was going ahead, and then they picked Kamala, and now it's neck and neck. And if the Republicans had said, okay, we're not going against Biden anymore, and they replaced him, it would have been a different dynamic as well. It's sort of interesting that we're sort of stuck in this 50-50 or 47-47 universe. And
it's just, and nothing you can do seems to move that needle.
Yeah,
and that's the part about this that strikes me. I looked at the polls, and I actually found myself not looking at the polls this morning. I said, "Oh no, it's going to be the same old story. The average of the poll is going to be Michigan +1, Pennsylvania +2." The only thing that surprised me was they were even nationally, as we've already talked about. But
and sort of the and I was showing the students this, like, and just today you'd have Pennsylvania Harris up by 1 or 2. Then there'd be another poll today that has Trump up 1 or 2, and then there'd be another one they're tying. There's another one, and we got into the whole dynamics of polling, that most polling is done on landlines, and most people don't have landlines anymore. They have cell phones.
Do you remember that Literary Digest poll from? You don't remember it, but do you remember the story about it from 1936 when FDR won massive re-election? The Literary Digest was the precursor to Time magazine, and was really good. I've read some old copies. It's really good. And they did a poll, and they used telephones. 1936. The only people who had telephones tended to be Republicans, who were the better off at that time, and they projected a massive Alf Landon. He was the Republican candidate victory, while FDR was probably going to get slammed. Well, FDR won by one of the most massive landslides in history. So we're dealing with kind of like one of those major technological shifts. If you think of yourself in your own cell phone, how often do you, if you don't recognize a number, do you not pick it up?
Right.
And so if I'm getting a call from a pollster, also, is it a legitimate pollster or is it a push poll?
Yes.
And are they trying to?
Well, explain the push poll for the 3 million voters that out there watching us.
If I get this wrong, you tell me.
Wrong.
I hope so. But that's where you're actually trying to push the voter in a particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
You're calling up saying you're a pollster. Oh, okay. Defense is down. And they say, do you support a child murderer like Kamala Harris? Oh no.
And I was telling people, you do a push poll early in the campaign to sort of help you figure out what issues will have salience. So if I'm saying, it's David Kerr versus Bill Leap, you say, well, who are you going to vote for in this election? And then
Bill Leap, of course.
And then you say, well, if you knew that the other person was a lobbyist, would that make you more likely, less likely, more in favor, more against? And then you can sort of gauge what issues you should talk about. But at this point, the push poll is exactly what you're saying. Is you're trying to push the person, so not like a certain person with how you phrase it. Last week I had a poll that came to the landline, and I couldn't tell who it was from. They had push poll questions, but they had it on both sides. So it was really I thought it was a pretty fair poll. Even though it used push polls, it pushed on both sides for the congressional race, which I thought was interesting.
So this has been the 7th district race?
Yes.
Interesting.
So it was really interesting that way. But the other thing that's this year is,
and that for if we have time, that's a really interesting topic.
Yep. Oh, we'll get to it. Yep. But for this year, we're also getting, I don't know about you, but I'm getting text messages from everybody and their cousin.
I don't know who got my number. I do stop, delete, never contact me again. And I get another one within 5 minutes.
Mine will let me say report it as junk. But
to whom, I wonder?
I know, really. And so it's sort of the way it's working is a certain number of your texts you pay for are free, and then anything over that you end up having to pay more for. So they sit there and they keep, both sides are sending me texts. I mean, races in Montana or in Idaho. It's really important that you support me in my campaign for Congress in Idaho. And I don't know anything about you. But it is. It's so if you're known on one committee, or if you've given money to somebody, and Obama did this very effectively. If you signed up with Obama, he had a great database.
One of the true masterful political coups was his database.
Yes,
and then I never really knew who became the heir to the database.
Well, he sells it.
Oh, smart man.
So the different campaigns will want it, and so he'll sell the database. So at one point when he was first running, Obama said, "Do you want to know who my vice president is?" And so loads of people, including myself, said, "Okay, fine, I'd like to know who it is." And then now everybody gets my cell number, and I'm like, "Thanks a lot," but
I had no idea it was that integrated.
Yes, right, it is, and so in the same way as on the Republican side. Yeah.
Well.
I didn't mean to freak you out there, big guy.
Sometimes it does, how interconnected these guys are.
So as we look forward to, I mean, I guess, will there ever be an October surprise again if people are voting in September?
I wonder how that could possibly be. I mean, we may have 30% of the voters having already voted by my birthday, which is October 1st, and Jimmy Carter's birthday, by the way.
Oh, wow.
We should note that. He's going to be 100.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right.
Only president to ever make 100.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
Just throwing that in. It has nothing to do with our conversation. It's the president.
It's the president, so it ties that way.
But anyway, will there be an October surprise? It gets harder and harder to have one if you don't have that many people who've already made up their mind, gone to vote, and are just going to wait for Election Day.
Right. And for those who don't know October surprise, it used to be the sort of this gem in all races, quite honestly. We know that. Right, either the weekend before the election, some bad news would happen, with the whole point of trying to make people so upset they wouldn't vote for them, and we won't get into examples of it because it's touchy.
In local races, it's often some sort of trashing letter from somebody prominent that comes on Saturday.
Yes.
In national elections, it was an accusation that George Bush was trying to sabotage the release of the hostages in 1980 when he was running with Ronald Reagan.
Right. Yep.
And so, yeah, there's always, and then in it was in 2000, there's the revelation that George H.W. Bush, gotta get my,
George W. Yep.
George W. H.W. was the war hero, and George W. Bush and Dick Cheney both had DWI convictions.
Right.
And that actually did make a difference in the election.
Yep.
Because it was about a 3-point margin, and that closed up to a hair's breadth.
Yes. So and that's why it'll be interesting. We're more likely to get these negative September surprises now.
But what being really candid here, what more negative surprises could you give on Donald Trump?
Well, yeah.
I mean, he's a convicted felon. He's facing charges across a wide range of various venues. You name the charge, he seems to have it. He's got the conviction for the sexual molestation, and none of this seems to be a surprise to anybody. In fact, it almost rolls off people's tongues like, oh yeah, that yeah.
Yep.
And that doesn't bother me. Or I've become so accustomed to hearing it, I don't care anymore.
And it's sort of I wonder if it's sort of the shift in our culture. I mean, when Bill Clinton was found to have done what he did,
yes,
he harkened back and said, well, they all do it. So people would talk about Kennedy, or they talk about Eisenhower having a mistress when he was in the military, or Johnson having a mistress when he was a senator. So I wonder how much the population is just immune to it, that that it doesn't mean anything anymore. And I don't know. I just remember for like my mom's generation, it would be an anathema that you did some things, but now it just seems to be like culture.
And I wonder if, well, it's kind of hard to tell in the era we're in. Bill Clinton's dalliance might not have gone over well at all, because it was very abusive of a young woman. At the same token, today I wonder, would it strike the American population as all that terrible?
Right. Would there have been an impeachment of him for that? Right. So it's interesting. So one of the major themes of the Democrats this year is the threat to democracy argument. And you sort of, alluded to some of the things about Trump, but how is that, in your opinion, have you seen that that's a major theme for the Democrats? Or
they played on that very strongly in 2022, and there's a reason for having a counterbalance in the House and the Senate, and that proved a very effective argument, because, frankly, the 2022 election was not a particularly grand success for the GOP, so you get into this election. There are some things that worry me about. I don't quite jump on it and say the democracy is at the crossroads. At the same token, for instance, Trump's desire to eliminate this so-called deep state, which I don't really believe exists, having been a federal employee for 33 years. I wish I could have been a part of it. It would have been fun. But nobody invited me to the deep state. Sort of like being a Mason. Nobody ever told me the secrets. And so I have to come back and say, what bothers me? Well, his desire, for instance, to make so much of the civil service beholden, kind of pre-Chester A. Arthur days, beholden to the president, to have Schedule F, which would be exclusively appointed by the president, about 20 to 30,000 appointees. That would be a big shift, and it would make it much more personal power in the presidency. There's a school of argument already that says we have too many presidential appointees. So he really wants to get hold of the federal bureaucracy and shape it and run it the way he wants to. Everybody's serving at his will. I do get a little anxious about his occasional comments about Vladimir Putin, somebody I think we all know and loathe. He sort of admires the way the guy runs the government, and that strikes me as very, very disturbing.
Well, and it's interesting. So I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Democrat who's walking door to door for the Democrats in Stafford for the whole ticket, for House, Senate, and President. First thing that she talked about was the threat to democracy. And then at the end of the conversation, that was the next thing the last thing she talked about was the threat to democracy. Now, of course, you and I are cringing at that because we're not a democracy, we're a republic. So therefore, I get really cranky when they use that.
But a representative
Right.
republic, and
Right.
and
But but it was interesting because I've been watching some different TV shows, particularly CNN and MSNBC, and if you listen to the Haley voters, they will say there's certain things that the Biden administration and Democrats are advocating for that they consider as much as a threat as January 6th. And there's more of them. And so when they try to explain that, they get shouted down about, January 6th. And they're like, well, I'm not disagreeing January 6th was a bad experience. But the Haley voter says, but I'm really concerned about, calling, if you're going to say that a free and fair election is illegitimate, then it's just equally bad to say the Supreme Court's illegitimate because you lost the vote. If you're going to say that, so that goes against our system of government. To say that the court is illegitimate and that we need to fundamentally change it. And
Franklin Roosevelt tried to
Right.
do the same thing back in 1937.
Yep, 36
And 37, and when he wasn't getting the rulings he wanted from the Supreme Court, and his own party rebelled
Yep.
strongly and heavily against it. I think that since that would require, if you expanded the number of justices, that doesn't require a constitutional amendment.
Right.
But you would need a supermajority in the Senate, and that is not going to happen. And there are enough constitutional scholars amongst the Democrats that I don't think they would support it.
Right. And so then there's a couple other issues that they point to. There's why, and this is why the Haley voters are not just running over like they did before, is because, having the bureaucracy reimagine old laws, like the Clean Air Act from the 70s to be reimagined now instead of passing new laws. And having the bureaucracy just reimagine things, and that's not how the system works. And so there's certain things that issue-wise that people view. That's why when they've done polling and they find that people don't view that Trump alone is a threat to democracy, that the Democrats are as well. And it's really an interesting dynamic. So where do we go from here? Anything you see earth-shattering, prognosticating between now and?
I would not. I don't bet, and there's a reason for that because I often lose. I'm a terrible poker player. I can't bluff, and I can't bet on the right horse if my life depended on it. Actually, I did bet on the Kentucky Derby, and it was a complete disaster. Fortunately, it didn't involve more than a few dollars. I think Harris is going to win, but I think it's going to be extremely close. I mean, extremely close. 269 with that electoral vote hanging out there someplace. And if Trump were to win, I would not be that surprised. I know my Democratic friends are energized. That's one thing I would say is the Kamala Harris shift was really energize the Democratic base, and they have a much superior ground game. And a ton of money that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Mm-hmm. So that may tilt the balance. But at the moment, looking at the polls, looking at the general energy on both levels, Trump's amazing staying power at holding on to his position, I wouldn't want to bet too much on either side.
Right. I think, and it's interesting. We talked about the polling being sketchy. So I always like the type where you talk to people and listen to people. And they had a reporter from CBS who went out to Las Vegas. And she said she spent, if I get this right, a whole day and only found 3 people that wanted Harris. And she talked to waitresses and truck drivers and elderly. And I mean, it was really interesting. So I agree. It's just, I don't know that we know what's going to happen. It used to be that you'd look at yard signs, but people aren't doing the yard signs for, they might do it for Congress or Senate, but a lot of them are hesitant to do it for Trump because they don't want to have their neighbors being upset with them.
And actually, I've come across a lot of people who had a similar reaction to putting up Harris Walz signed.
Oh, wow.
They don't want to have the repercussions.
Okay.
One guy was actually afraid his neighbor would shoot his dog.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was like it's gotten way out of hand when it comes to the tension involved. I think we've lost our civility. I remember our campaigns going back, which I was actively involved in until 1972. I was in high school, and my father and I were out canvassing and campaigning. And even though it was Richard Nixon versus George McGovern, and we were for George McGovern, I still never came across the level of hostility or well, anyway, people not being very friendly that I've come across in this campaign.
And just in our general, basically, like the whole culture of it is just so acrimonious.
I almost wish they hadn't invented the internet.
Right.
It has allowed a level of discourse which is very damaging to. If you want to threat to democracy, that's it. You can't have a civil discussion, and when you can't have a civil discussion, you can't compromise.
Well, somebody the other day pointed out that with the internet and doing everything online, you can say whatever you want, but nobody will know it's you. And then we were talking about the Federalist Papers, the anti-Federalist Papers, and nobody knew who was writing those either. So it's not so much a new thing, but the tenor was a lot different.
It was very deliberate
yes.
and very rational and almost legalistic.
Yes. And it is. Somebody I know thought, he prefaced his comment, and I respect him greatly. He's on your side of the aisle, but I respect him. He said, hopefully Harris will win by a large margin, period. Then he said, because if we get rid of Trump, then maybe the animosity and hatred will disappear. And I many reasons why I respect him, but the reason why he said that, it obviously was electorally, we get rid of Trump, not some other way. But I said, but I don't know that it will get less than that. I don't know that we will get back to. I mean, we had a pandemic and people couldn't be nice to each other.
I would love to go back to the days when our candidates or our GOP candidates were Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. I'd take George W. Bush in a heartbeat right now. And at one time, I was not a fan of his. Actually, I think rather highly of him. And even Richard Nixon, a truly talented New Deal Republican. And these were all, people had strong opinions. My father loathed Richard Nixon, but we talked about him in a civil fashion.
No.
And I would take any of those guys at this point, and just to have that kind of campaign again.
Yeah, the civility is just amazing, or the lack thereof, on both sides. It's just amazing.
And I think it has a bad habit of filtering down into from the national level, where we seem to have lost all brakes on our behavior, on what we say, on how we characterize the other side, and it's gone into the local area as well. I mean, we watch our local races in Stafford. We don't need to go into depth because that's not the topic of this discussion, but we say and do anything, and do outrageous things.
Yep. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And stuff that simply would not have occurred 15 years ago.
Yeah. Somebody I know and respect, and I'm probably paraphrasing this badly, but said that the mantra seems to be nowadays: if you don't have something nasty to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And it just seems, and when they said that, I'm like, really, that's sort of where we're at on this. So now we can shift down ballot. In Virginia, Kane versus Chow. Anything worth pushing?
In that one, I don't see any real chance for Chow actually pulling that off. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't have the organization. He hasn't engaged the campaign. Kane, as it's curious, Kane has actually always outperformed Warner in the elections. Timing. I remember 2014, Warner almost lost.
Mm-hmm.
And Kane has always managed to actually have better percentages. Is he more popular? I don't know, or is it just bad timing for the elections?
Not bad. He got really good opponents.
Yeah,
he picked the right,
that's right.
person to run against. It's one that didn't he had George Allen one year, the Macaca year, I think. And then maybe Gilmore. I mean, he just has been.
And Gilmore was, that was. Thank you very much for that. He appreciated it. And Cal is he hasn't been willing to debate Kane, and that's not good. There've been 3 opportunities to debate, and he's failed to respond to either one of them. So I think he's just kind of all but surrendered this election.
Right. Okay. When we move to the House, you said that's Vindman as the Democrat and Anderson as the Republican.
And it was interesting during the primary. Vindman was kind of viewed as a sort of parachute candidate. He was sort of parachuted into the district. He's been an Army officer, which means you don't actually have a residence. You live wherever the Army tells you to do. And so I've never picked on a serviceman for not having a permanent residence until he retires. He's not the most exciting candidate, but he is a very intellectual candidate. He worked for the National Security Council. He's a lawyer. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. He was claimed to fame was working with his brother Alexander on the Ukrainian, the illicit conversation between Donald Trump and help me with the guy's name. I need a little help. He's the president of Ukraine.
Oh, Zelensky.
Yeah, Zelensky, of course.
Yeah, okay.
It should have been on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, with Zelensky, where Donald Trump was basically saying, find me some dirt on Biden. And the implicit assumption was, and I'll get you your aid. Well, that went to be that got highly politicized, became a impeachment trial, and both brothers became prominent. And Eugene is running for Congress, pretty much based on that. It's a curious thing too about this race. The last election, you had Spanberger, who was an incumbent congresswoman, and then you had
Vega,
yes, surprisingly a very effective candidate. She was a Prince William County supervisor. They'd both held office before, and had both gone to the voters, been responsive to constituents, and what have you. In this election, you had neither candidate. And it was also both those candidates were women. Mm-hmm. In this election, it's both men, and both men who have never held office. So I don't necessarily say that's an absolute requirement. It could even be an asset, but it kind of tells me it's just kind of neither one knows quite how to relate to the electorate.
Well, and the Republican is Derek Anderson, who also has a military record and is native. He's from Spotsylvania.
Yeah.
Which and has experience and whatnot with different areas. So you have 2 military guys going against each other in a district that has some good chunk of military in it. With us, part of I think the district goes up to Belvoir, then it goes down to. Then it hits Quantico, then and that's a big chunk.
It goes quite. It's a big district.
Yeah.
It was drawn after the bipartisan redistricting committee was unable to draw a district, so the Supreme Court appointed a special master and drew the district.
Supreme Court of the U.S. of Virginia.
Virginia Supreme Court, absolutely. And what you've got is this really diverse district, and the weight of the Democrats is on the I-95 corridor, which is the eastern part of Prince William County, mm-hmm. All of Stafford, and Spotsylvania. You go west
in the city
of Fredericksburg, yes, which went very well for Spanberger. And then you go west, and you go west and south. You go as far south as Albemarle County, which has the Charlottesville address.
Yep.
And then you've got Manassas. It really the numbers were in Vega's case were very favorable for her in all the constituencies except Prince William County, and in Stafford, which was a real surprise, Spanberger lost by about 170 votes. It was 25,000 each.
Yep.
So and it was still extremely tight. The Cook Political Report says that it's a Democratic leaning marginal. And what I think is really fascinating is that may be the case, but we have 2 brand new candidates, a big election which is going to turn out a tremendous number of voters. Some people are saying that when they're asked if they're going to vote, they're getting like 93% of the people are saying they're going to vote, which would be staggering if that were true. I don't think so, but it's likely to be a big turnout.
And Spanberger, I hope this doesn't cause her grief.
She can take it.
It's not, and she's very likable. And I've met her several times, and she's been very helpful with different things for Stafford. But she's not on the Bernie Sanders side of the Democratic Party. She tends to be either a moderate or a little right of center as far as Democrats go, which helped her in our district because, as you said, there's such a diversity in our district. Yes, you have the Garrisonville and Griffith's part, which is a little bit more Democratic. And then you go to Rock Hill and you go to Hartwood, it's a little less.
Oh, by far, yes.
But you'll have your Stafford Lakes and stuff, and you'll have people that would be more likely to vote for her next year for governor, say, for example, because she's not seen as very far to the left. So that's another dynamic that since people don't know the two candidates for Congress right now, it's sort of an interesting who's going to sort of paint the picture of the other one sooner.
And I really don't think either candidate has succeeded in painting a picture of themselves or of the other candidate. If you look at Vindman, he at the last quarter, which is goes back to July, he raised $7 million, which was a lot for a congressional race, and Anderson had raised $1.4 million. Now, that may mean nothing when it gets to the general election because how many seats separate in the House? Is it like five
or six? Yeah.
So it hangs on a few swing states, and this is one of them.
Right.
And so I see a lot of national interest, a lot of last minute spending on get out the vote. Vindman is if not a terribly exciting speaker, is at least a very energetic candidate. He's going to be at Stafford for the opening of the early voting, crack of dawn at 9:00. Then he'll roam around and do that all day. He seems to not lack for energy, and I get the impression that Derek Anderson is pretty much the same. So these guys are both basically really unknown to the district, and they're going to probably go right up into the elections being sort of, Anderson Vindman. I don't know.
Well, and it's interesting with that race, and also that a certain degree depends on the up ballot, the presidential race, so that and it's sort of been, and Young can prove this, and I've said this for years, is that the Republicans get out 60% of the vote in Stafford and 60% of the vote in Spotsy or more. They tend to win the state because it's so tied. But this Exburb, EXBURB, which is a new term, not a suburb, but we're an Exburb, tends to be that if the Republican can do really well, then that will help win the state. And so it'll be interesting that if a large Trump vote comes out in Hartwood, George Washington District, parts of Spotsy, that would generally help Anderson. But what I hear about in all three of the sort of the tight races in Virginia for Congress, the Loudon race, us, and then the Good race that's down further us. Our race and the Good race, the division in the primary never really totally healed.
But I don't see a Democrat having any chance of taking the 5th district.
Well, that'll be interesting because supposedly there's what I hear is that the Republicans down there, for the good people, have no intention. They'll go and vote for Trump, but they're not going to vote for the Republican because they're so mad that he beat Good. So they're going to be at least that was in the paper. It was in the Post again as well, and the same is going on. I talked to somebody who lives in Spotsy, and they're getting the same feeling in Spotsy that they'll go and vote for Trump, but Strickland's people are, the people who voted for Strickland are so irate that they're not going to vote for Anderson. And if that happens, so that will be an interesting mix of, it could be that the three possible swing ones don't end up being swingy because of the primary being so acrimonious.
And it was a vicious primary.
Yes.
And that...
both of them were.
Oh, gosh, that one with Donald Trump endorsing...
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, I can't remember his name.
No, he's probably going to be a congressman, but I don't remember his name.
So, and I don't know. And again, some of that district, the fifth district, which is Louisa County and whatnot, has shifted a little bit too, as far as more people who work in Richmond who have bought houses and stuff out in there. So it'll be an interesting.
And the swinging areas of the state have expanded. It was all
Yes.
Northern Virginia. I remember going back to the 1980s, 1990s, Prince William County, Loudoun County were all reliably Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Now, well, if a Democrat wins the 7th, it'll be the Prince William County vote that powers them in.
Yep.
And that's kind of hard to imagine if you go back to ancient times and say, oh, well, those are Fairfax. In fact, it's really curious. Fairfax, which is that really vote-rich area of Virginia, which really powers the it's numbers of votes that matter, not percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a really good, strong turnout to vote. They didn't do it for Terry McAuliffe because he inspired such popular following. Not, but they had the ability to turn out votes in such a number that you can lose the rest of the state, and all but if you win Fairfax, you win the election.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't always the case. In 2000, the Fairfax County went for Bush. 2004, it went for Kerr. It didn't go for Kerr. It went for Bush again.
Mm-hmm.
And it began to shift, just like we have seen shifts in our areas of Stafford. We've seen it in Spotsylvania to a degree, not as much.
Right.
And the district you represented, you saw a similar shift over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going back, tracing it back to your heritage in the district.
Right. I mean, and it's sort of an interesting. I mean, there are some people that are really on the Republican side that really that's why they don't want more growth and more homes. It's because they don't want to change the demographics of the and the voting. But if you talk to some of the people who go out and talk to everybody, that you could swing them over. That they're not, and it'll be another thing that'll be interesting is this is a straight ticket voting, like last year's race was for the Senate and how it impacted the lower ballot. It'll be interesting if people just go in and grab the sample ballots and go that way.
I'm sensing more and more that people don't want to split their ballots anymore.
Right.
They want to follow a straight line vote. I'm going to be going to Montana next week, and Montana is where John Tester is running for re-election. He's a Democrat. This would be his third term. Mm-hmm. And Montana is a very red state. And he's always managed to be kind of a moderate, even by just by the standard of a strict moderate. And frankly, with Donald Trump running so strong in Montana, he's just not pulling the votes. And he's probably he's not the most endangered Republican, but he's a Democrat.
Yep.
But
at this point, yeah.
But he's certainly, if they lose Montana, the Republicans will have control of the Senate.
Yeah.
Because there really aren't any other Republican Senate seats that are in jeopardy. So you're finding places where there are these outlying Democrats who hold a seat, and they're the only Democrat who holds a seat in a red state. But this year, with Donald Trump on the ticket, they're just going to go right down the ticket and knock out the Democrat.
And that might hurt Brown in Ohio. Sherrod Brown is in the same sort of situation. But weirdly, and I was going to ask you if you had any surprises, because there's always at least one surprise in the Senate that nobody ever sees. I'm surprised at the polling of Scott in Florida, that he's only up. Trump will be up by 20, 30 points, but Scott is only up by 4 or 5 points over the Democrat, which is an interesting. So to me, that would be a race to look at, because I know a lot of people look at Ted Cruz, but I the numbers wise, and I don't understand why Scott's not doing well, but it just seems to be that's going to be the race to me, that if the Republicans going to lose one, that could be Florida.
And again, I think Florida is going to go overwhelmingly for Trump. And I think that Scott's going to be
saved by that.
Saved by that, because it's just less desire to split their tickets.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting, because I thought when Biden was, we go back to the Biden, when Biden was dropping in the polls, there were a lot of people who were going to vote for Trump but wanted to vote for Kane for Senate. And there were Republicans that were like, I'll vote for Trump, but I want there to be a check and a balance. But now that it's nip and tuck, I think you're right. I think there's going to be a lot of just straight ticket voting, which hurts somebody like Larry Hogan in Maryland, who, if it was not that, then he'd probably have a better shot. But I think the last poll had him down 21 points.
He's an extremely talented fellow. I like him. Democrat saying that. I don't know Also Brooks at all. But it's just one of these things where Maryland is so overwhelmingly registered Democrat, and on top of that, you tell people, well, if you give Larry Hogan a vote, you're guaranteeing a Republican Senate. That's enough to sway people's opinions.
Yep. So, any surprises that you see?
I think that they're really. I'll go with you on Florida. It could be. I don't think Ted Cruz has any troubles in from Texas. Yeah, Texas may one day become competitive. It's one of these things where it's always going to happen.
Yeah, like North Carolina. Always going to happen. It never does.
And North Carolina certainly is on the precipice. I mean, they have a very unpopular candidate for the GOP nomination for governor. That may hurt. Georgia's really not. That's a state. There's no Senate seat up that's of consequence. But if Georgia goes, I think if Georgia goes Democrat, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. Well, it'd be interesting. So you see the Republicans getting a majority, but nobody either way is going to have the supermajority to end a filibuster or anything. I mean, that's not going to happen round.
At best, it's going to be one or two.
And then the next round, there's a lot of Republicans up. So 2 years from now, the Republicans will be where the Democrats are this year, which is they're defending a lot of turf. 2 years from now, it will be the Republicans defending a lot of turf.
And if you're a candidate for governor in Virginia, or if you're a candidate running for re-election in 2026, you should almost hope for a Trump victory, because there's always a backlash, and Donald Trump is always good at producing backlashes, as he proved in 2016, and 2018. And if you're running for governor in Virginia, it always pays to be the party of the opposite party in the
White House.
White House. Abigail Spanberger, if she were the nominee, which she will be, and Donald Trump were president, she'd almost be guaranteed being governor.
Right, and that's just a historical trend for those of the people who are not junkies like we are. But it's like Biden gets in, Youngkin gets in. Trump, if whoever gets in, it just seems to be this anomaly in Virginia.
You go back to the 1980s. It was like a straight run of Democratic governors while there was a Republican in the White House.
Yes.
Then along comes Bill Clinton, and you get George Allen.
Yes, it's sort of Virginia just has this sort of weird thing that happens with that. In the House, any thoughts of which way the House ends up going?
There's so many swing seats. There are at least 25 swing seats. You only need to take a few. I don't see anybody prominent losing their seats, but I wouldn't predict a Democratic majority just yet. A little bit depends on what happens with what's happening in Washington right now on the spending bill. If you shut down the government just before the election, with memories pretty fresh by election day, that might not result as a real positive for the Republican Party, since they seem to be holding everything up on the voter ID bill, and people want their government just to work, and it's they want the bills to be paid. They want the defense appropriations to go through. They want the Social Security bill. They want the Social Security Administration funded, and looking like you can't do that when you have the majority is very, very weak. I don't quite. If I were Donald Trump, I don't think I quite understand why I would be endorsing a stalemate at this point.
Right, and I saw that yesterday, that he was saying to shut down the government, and I too, I didn't see why he was saying that. I just saw that it was on the scroll on the bottom of one of the channels, so I was like, I don't know why, because, as you said, it just doesn't make you look good right before an election. However, if if it's September 20th, the 30th, if you do a stopgap till later, everybody will have voted. So. Because they were early voted, so
30% already made up their minds.
Right, so,
even if they're angry, you can't take your vote back. Somebody asked me that question the other day. Can I go and get my vote back? No.
No.
When you're done, when you voted, you're done.
Now, if you absentee vote, you can, because they hold it until to see if you show up on the polls on election day. But if you go into the office and vote, they just put it in the box and it's gone. And so that's sort of interesting. So you can't do, even if you did a September or an October surprise, you can't. You could only influence the absentee votes, not
That's
not the
interesting.
other ones. And I only know that because my mom would absentee vote, and then because I would interact with Anna Hash, who's our registrar. She's like, "Yeah, we hold on to that in case somebody comes in on election day, and it says in there they did an absentee ballot, and they'll say it got received." But if the person's like, "Well, no, I want to vote now in person," then they just make a note. They contact the office, and the office just sort of notes that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is good in that if something happens,
You can change
you
your
can
vote.
change your vote. But it's bad in that it's bad, and it's bad for if you just walk into the office and vote, because then you can't change it. They can't go and say, "Oh yeah, let me pull out your vote," because they can't tell. So it's interesting wrinkle with that. Um, so so we'll see. I'll probably vote on election day, or I'll go to the courthouse.
Oh, I'm definitely voting on
um,
election day. It's one of those things. It's a tradition. You get Daphne. We get in the car. We go to McDonald's. We go vote. Even I'm working the polls. I'll take a couple hours to vote properly. It's a democratic. I mean, democratic with a little D tradition. Everybody gets to go vote.
otherwise known as we're both old. So
That's true.
so we're doing it the old way. Do you have a landline?
Yes. No, I don't. No,
you
I
don't.
I
Okay,
do
so
not.
you're more advanced than I am. So
No, I got rid of my landline about 10 years ago.
oh wow, you really are.
I just
savvy.
have my cell phone.
Okay. So we've sort of talked about the campaign. You made your predictions. We'll hold you to them.
You remember the old saying, predict, if you have to predict often so nobody remembers what you last predicted.
That's right. Yep. Well, and then if anything changes, we can always pop in a special edition between now and
Sure.
election day.
So
If you remember, when we had our TV show, I predicted that Trump would win, and almost exactly how he did win.
That's right. You did
So-
very well, too.
So I right now I'm up in the air. I don't know which way it's going to go. I'm with you that I think it's his to lose at this point. And it'll be interesting beyond. There should not be any more debates. Neither of them should want to debate. Harris is smart to say I want to debate.
Oh, yeah.
But neither of them, because Trump, obviously all they're going to do is bait Trump. Nobody learns anything from debates. I think we did when we did our debates. People learned stuff.
Oh,
But
yeah.
on the higher scale, nobody learns anything. It's just got you the best soundbite. It's sort of like when you're watching hockey or NASCAR. You're waiting for the crash up.
Or the big fight.
Yes, and for her, the moderators would probably push her to make a stand on an issue, which is not what she wants to do. She wants to bait him, and so I don't see any advantage for her to go and do a debate.
Well, she's already
at this point.
She's already achieved her objective with the debate.
Yes,
So, once you've won that battle, you don't necessarily go back and fight it
Right.
again.
so I don't see anything massively that's going to shift. But how do we know? We don't know. The number of students that asked me, okay, well, what happened if Trump got shot last Sunday? What would they do? And they're like, but ballots go out. People can vote Friday, and you already have the ballots. Can you make new ballots? I mean, it's a really weird universe we're in right now. So, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see what happens. But so as we end, we normally ask people, for any particular story or thing that they love about Stafford or makes a nice, warm, happy, thing.
Well, this is not necessarily warm and happy.
Okay, well then we don't want it. No, go ahead.
No, but it was one of those moments where the community came together and I think did the right thing, and it's appropriate because we're taping this. We're not too far from 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the county school board back when that happened, and you were teaching, of course, back then too. And we were all dispersed to the winds, all the members of the school board, and we were using this brand new thing that they'd given us, which was a cell phone, really cool. And it was I was walking. I'd taken a trek from 7th Street in Washington, the FAA building where I worked, so got a first-hand view of the entire crisis, and so it was kind of an agitated state, kind of like like you feel when you're when you're not necessarily super upset but anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, our superintendent felt like he had to make a call as to whether we'd have school the next day, because some people wanted all the kids home,
Mm-hmm.
and the others did not. And it was interesting. We had, it wasn't really a conference call because we weren't really allowed to have conference calls, but we were playing telephone tag, and just barely within the law, I guess. And I was impressed by how many that all of us wanted to have school the next day, because we knew that so many of the Stafford community were involved in the security or military that they wouldn't be able to arrange childcare for their children. And then at that time we had a wonderful superintendent named Russell Watson.
Mm-hmm.
And Russell said, I don't want them sitting at home watching those planes crashing into the Twin Towers all day. I want them to be in school where they'll know they'll be safe. Their teachers will tell them they're safe. And what my Stafford moment here is how many people called me. And I didn't get that many calls, to be honest with you. It wasn't like people were ringing off the hook to talk to their school board member. And it said what a really good thing it was that we as a community had decided to be normal. The next day we would go to school and we would make our children feel welcomed and safe. And I really liked that. I thought that was that was it's typical of Stafford.
Yep. It is. It's really, that's a beautiful story, and it's true. I mean, there's just that degree of continuity, and it's just nice to have.
And there was no disagreement. There was lots of concern for each other. Nobody scored political points. It was just let's do what's right. And I don't think we did anything. I don't think we said anything as grand as saying let's do what's right. Let's just do what we think is what we should do.
Cool. Awesome. That's a great way. All right. Well, thank you, David, for that really great story and touching story. And thank you as well for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on Stafford Connect. It's really important that we talk about the issues. And if anything, I dare not say this, but if anything pops up or, occurs that we feel we need to do something before the election, we'll pop in another time.
Sure.
Who knows with this election, it's like every week. But I appreciate you taking the time. It's always great spending time with you. It's been quite a while.
Too long.
But my Facebook keeps sending me pictures of when it's like, remember this anniversary of when you and Dave, did this on the show.
I love those old pictures.
Yep.
I was thinner.
I had hair. So
likewise.
Well, great. Well, thank you, and we hope you come back maybe after the election or next year, and we sort of get a feel for what's going on.
I really enjoyed myself, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, so I want to thank you, our audience, as well, for taking the time to join us for this episode. I've hoped that you've heard some things that give you a little more clarity as you prepare to cast your vote in the upcoming election. Currently, the election is close. The ultimate deciding factor is the Electoral College, with many states, including Virginia, within the margin of error. So please vote, either early voting, absentee voting, or on Election Day, because your vote matters, especially in a race that is as tight as this one. That being said, our next episode of Stafford Connect will feature a discussion about a hot topic. That one is data centers. We've invited an expert in data center development, Kerr Roberts, to come and share his views on this timely topic, so you don't want to miss it. Until next time, I'm Tom Cohen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcast or catch it on video on our YouTube channel. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.